Hello, thank you for watching my Mr. Plumber videos. What you're looking at is two test gauges on two separate gas meter bars. So we're waiting for the plumbing inspector, and what is typically done is we jazz up the system with air to 3 pounds. It's a little more than 3 pounds. Now this goes from the inlet of it's actually the outlet of the meter, but going into the house side. So the inlet from the house side going to the gas cocks, and the gas cocks are off. So right now we have 3 pounds on each line, and this is necessary for the inspector to give us a tag so that we can turn the gas on for this particular job. When we get the tag, the gas company will then come down and install meters, and they have to also be synchronized with an account. So that's all set up with the gas company. So here is the gas cock that's in the off position, as you can see, and we're testing 3 pounds right to this gas cock. So in this particular job, we have two boilers side by side. They're both gas fired, so this one would go to the other meter that we were looking at, and that has 3 pounds on it also. A key note here is that you would never test 3 pounds past this gas cock into the gas valve. That would occasionally an inspector will ask for a low pressure test, which would mean you open that after relieving the 3 pounds, you open the gas cock and then test it to a ½ pound, and that's pretty typical. And once that holds, you're usually all set. So this, moving on to the hydronics. This particular job was in an existing building, obviously, and the conditions were a little tough for running piping. So we ran hot and cold piping for 2 separate water heaters, which are electric. The owner didn't want to go with indirect fired, so we set it up for indirect, even though we're currently using electric. Not our decision. It's the owner's decision. It's basically based on whatever they want to pay for. So these are Burnham Alpine 105s, and with these most high efficiency systems, you will end up piping arrangements in primary, secondary piping, and pump arrangements. So this pump right here will actually pump just to this manifold only, to those 2 T's, and then this pump right here will carry that water across into the apartment. These are 2 apartments in a single zone. Each apartment is a single zone, and this is our air eliminator going into our expansion tank, our auto feeder, and backflow preventer, which is code. As you can see, this tubing, a lot of this tubing is done in PEX tubing, which is a great time and money saver. And so for this particular job, it worked out quite well. On these high efficiency boilers, especially when you're connecting to an existing system, I always like to add a strainer, because you get a lot of particulate from the old system that accumulates in the new system, and to keep that out, I always put a strainer in. So each boiler has a strainer, and that strainer has a plug that can be relieved, cleaned out. You can also put a valve on the end of the plug, and replace the plug with a valve, so that way you don't have to do a shutdown to clear out the strainer. So these units are direct vent, and they're running conventional PVC. This is the exhaust, this is the intake, and the Burnham Alpine, they give you the 2-foot starter section out of I believe it's CPVC, and they do that because the exhaust has a slightly higher temperature. They do that for concerns of the exhaust being of higher temperature to melt the plastic, but they only do it for 2 feet. Other manufacturers allow you to use PVC directly into the boiler. But here is our exhaust, and that just goes directly outside, and here is our air intake, which goes into the boiler. Here is our termination outside. As you can see, we have a Massachusetts required sign of gas vents, and we have our exhausts and our intakes. The exhausts are sticking out past the building, the required amount that they are supposed to be out, and here is our intakes. And that's pretty much it. The Burnham Alpine is a condensing boiler, which means that it puts out a lot of moisture when it runs. And this moisture comes out of the bottom here and needs some place to go. If you don't have a gravity drain, you have to pump it out with a little ejector. So both of the boilers on this job have mini ejectors. One of the things I don't like about the Burnham Alpine is the connection on this condensate drain. It's very cumbersome, and it uses unconventional parts. So what they give you is they give you this plastic tube, which normally sticks out quite a bit more. It comes out to like here. This one is cut. And then they give you this dresser coupling that's supposed to go on the end of this, and then you're supposed to make your connections after this. Well, I don't like that connection at all. So what I did was I cut the plastic connection, and I gave this a kiss of heat with my heat gun. Not a torch, but a heat gun. This heat gun. Just enough to soften the plastic. And when the plastic was softened enough, I was able to slide the 3/4 inch Street 90. You could use pipe, but 3/4 inch Street 90 fit just right inside it. And then when it cools, the plastic shrinks back down and makes a nice tight connection over the joint. You got to be careful, obviously, so you don't overheat it with the heat gun. But just kissing it with the heat gun is enough to soften the plastic enough to shove this in. And then in here, I have a piece of copper going down into the condensate pump. Now, I didn't have to solder this. Actually, what I used is this copper lock. So that way you don't even have to solder it. I just, dip the end of the pipe in some copper lock and just stick it in, twist it, and then, that'll never fall apart. That copper lock holds like 1,000 pounds. But anyway, that's how I do these. And it's an easy solution for a cumbersome connection. So that's how I do it. Also, on this particular job, regarding our water heaters, we installed, even though this is a 2-family, we installed 3 water heaters. One is for a common laundry connection. So even though we're allowed to use PEX tubing on water piping, we are not allowed to use it within 2 feet of a water heater. So all this has to be copper on the connection to the water heater within 2 feet. And then beyond 2 feet, we're allowed to convert to PEX. As you can see right here, we converted back to PEX. Another thing I wanted to mention is that this is a unistrut bar, and this is copper tubing. Copper tubing can never just go up against a unistrut unless it has a special plating on it. If it does not have a special plating on it, they make special unistrut clips that have an isolator to stop the galvanic action. Because if you have copper touching steel or galvanized steel, they will exchange electrons, and it'll actually rot the copper pipe out, eventually rotting it and creating a hole. By installing an isolator, that stops that problem. So you can see wherever I have copper touching the steel galvanized unistrut, I use an isolator